Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's lesson. Let's go ahead and go over today's lesson objective. So, today we will explore how scientists use fossil fuels and sedimentary rocks to learn about the history of the Earth. Okay, let's go ahead and go over our vocabulary. So our first vocabulary word is fossil fuels. So a fossil fuel is a natural non-renewable fuel such as coal, oil, or natural gas formed a very long time ago from the remains of living organisms. So these are different ways. This is a non-renewable energy. So we use fossil fuels for energy, and they're formed from living organisms. All right. Now, let's go ahead and go over what are some types of fossil fuels. So, the first type of fossil fuel is coal. So, coal is a solid fossil fuel that is formed from the remains of plants over long periods of time. So, fossil fuel is a solid, it's made out of plants, and we generally burn coal. We don't really use coal too much nowadays, but there's still certain industries that use it. All right. Natural gas. So, gas is a flammable material, which means it can set on fire without a definite form. It's produced from the remains of marine organisms buried under layers of sediment or little tiny rocks found near oil deposits. So, natural gas is a flammable form of fossil fuel, and we find it in under layers of the ocean. Okay. And our last renewable energy that we're going to talk about today is oil. So, oil is a non renewable natural resource produced from the remains of organisms buried under layers of sediments, from millions of years. So, all of our fossil fuels take a really long time to be made, and we're going to go over that in just a second. All right. And last but not least is sedimentary rock. So, sedimentary rock is a rock formed when particles of other rocks are deposited in layers and are compacted or crushed together and cemented or binding of sediments. So, sediments are tiny little pieces of rocks. And so, sedimentary rocks is actually formed from other rocks. And it's what happens when a bunch of all these little particles are dumped into one place and they're compacted, they're pushed together, and then they're cemented together. Like they're like kind of like glued together by different elements, usually salt, to create sedimentary rocks. All right, now let's go into our actual lesson for today. I'm going to go ahead and close out my face so you guys can see that. So from last time, we kind of went over how are fossil fuels created. So fossil fuels are first created from marine plants and animals, or just plants and animals. Necessarily have to be marine plants or animals, and they die and sink to the bottom of the sea. Right? Then from there, the animals and the plant layers get covered with mud and different organic materials. And then from there, all that thing keep getting pushed together and pushed together and pushed together. And eventually, more layers of sediments or little tiny rocks come up, and more mud and more organic material keeps layering on top of these dead plants and animals until there's a bunch of pressure and heat that's applied. And then it'll turn into either coal or it will turn into natural gas, depending on the materials that we originally had. All right. Now, let's go into what happens when a plant dies. So, a plant will die, or this is one example, will die. And then from there, um, it will go sink to the bottom of a lake in this case. So, if is plant by like a swamp will die and then sink to the bottom of a lake or a swamp. From there, there's going to be something called peat that gets laid on top of it, which is decaying like leaf and plant matter, or it turns into decaying leaf and plant matter. So that's what this dead plant is going to turn into. It's going to turn into peat. And then from there, we're going to have more sediments that are going to layer on top and top on top of it, right? And then it's going to eventually get pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed down and heated by the earth and all that pressure and all that weight being applied to it. And it's going to turn into coal. So coal is going to be that hard substance, and it is made from decaying plants. And how we extract coal is by coal mining. And so that means we're going to go into, a lot of times we see it in caves where we have to go underground and really dig hundreds and hundreds of layers down to extract coal, because our coal takes hundreds of millions of years to be created. It takes a very long time for our plants to turn into coal. This is a very long process. All right. Now, what happens when marine animals die? So, marine animals are animals that live in the ocean, and millions of years ago, these marine animals, they died and they sank to the bottom of the ocean. And similar to how coal is made, we are now will have different like mud and organic materials layering on top of our dead animals, our dead marine life. And so we're going to have sediments and more layers of these organic materials that are just going to keep layering on top of our decaying animals. And along with all of our different layers, our sediments being layered on top, we're also going to have pressure and heat being applied to these decaying animals. And then eventually they will turn into either natural gas or oil. And these are both liquid forms. One's gas and one's these are both liquid forms of fossil fuels. And so, how we extract this type of fossil fuel is from oil mining or drilling, or sometimes we call it fracking as well. And this is what it looks like. And so, they essentially drill deep into the earth and extract this liquid from the earth, because this whole process takes millions of years to happen. So, it takes millions of years for a decaying animal to turn into natural gas or oil. And then we extract that from the earth to help us with extract different energy. Now, one thing that's really cool about fossil fuels is that fossil fuels are made in sedimentary rock. So that means layers and layers, right? So the thing about sedimentary rocks is we'll see distinct layers. So over here, you'll see different layers and different colors on our rocks. It's a key characteristic of sedimentary rocks. So fossil fuels are made within sedimentary rock layers under heat and pressure from the earth. So what this does is this allows scientists to learn about the Earth's history. So, depending on where we find different types of fossil fuels and different types of fossils and things like that, will tell us how old our Earth is, or different events that have happened during Earth's history, which is kind of cool. Now, another thing to remember about fossil fuels, which is that they are non-renewable forms of energy, which means that they cannot be recreated within our lifetime. So, coal and oil and natural gas, it takes millions of years for it to be formed, because if we think about all the layers of rocks that have to be layered on top of our decaying plants and animals, it takes a very long time for fossil fuels to be made. So they're considered non-renewable. So once we use these non-renewable forms of energy, once we use our coal, once we use our oil, and once we use our natural gas, we don't have any more left to use. And so it's something to consider when we're thinking about when we're using coal, oil, and natural gas, because we're not going to get them back. So we want to be careful and want to be able to conserve these forms of fuel, so that we can still continue to have energy and continue to have the lifestyle that we have right now. All right, let's go ahead and go over today's lesson objective. So today we explored how scientists use fossil fuels and sedimentary rocks to learn about the history of the Earth. All right, thank you so much. Thanks for joining me today. I hope this was helpful. I'll see you next time. Bye.